kind of related to discrimination, another topic I really want to talk about is feminism, and this is a topic I get pretty riled up about this. Um, and then people might be saying, well, you live in Korea, we're a country where there isn't much feminism, then why you care about feminism in the USA? And the reason is because I follow on my newsfeed on Facebook, I follow a lot of my different channels, IGN, Wired, Verge, Time, Economist, like a lot of these tech articles and other articles like that I thought were pretty reputable articles, pretty reputable magazines. And they would be posting these feminist articles like day after day, like TechCrunch, like PC Gamer. And I was like, well, I subscribe to this magazine because I care about games, or I care about technology, or I care about world events, but why does this have to do with feminism, and why does it keep polluting my feed? Well, it all started, I think, about 2 years ago, 2014, because of this controversy called Gamergate. And along with Gamergate came this whole Reddit fiasco with Ellen Pao, who is, she's I guess you can say she's kind of like a feminist, kind of like I don't know. Like, anyways, this Reddit fiasco and Gamergate and everything, all these feminist issues started happening at once. I think it really came like snowballed from 2 years ago, and now it's like basically everywhere. It's permeating everything from like gaming articles to politics to economist articles to everything. So it's everywhere now, and I can't really escape it. So I have to talk about it because I think because I disagree with a lot of the things that they said, a lot of the things that people said and commented on those articles. I'm full support of women's rights. I'm just gonna say that if it has something to do with women's rights, like women doesn't have the right to do something, doesn't have the equal opportunity for something, I'm in full support of that. So I'm not a misogynist. I don't hate women or anything. It's just that the modern day feminists take issues with so many things that I feel like are very, very small and trivial. And that haven't really been an issue before, and then they basically are complaining about very, very small, like minor things, minute details about things that really shouldn't really be an issue. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about all these articles that Time and Economist publish. I think the word feminist is being corrupted these days because it's being used by women who aren't really feminists. People would call this term feminazis, but that's kind of, they aren't really feminists in the traditional sense. The old feminists who fought for women's rights, for suffrage, to get the right to vote, to get the right to have an abortion. The first and second wave feminists were real feminists. Those are women's rights. Having an abortion and stuff, that's women's rights. And having like equal pay, right? That's women's rights. But these feminists, quote unquote feminists, on social media these days are just women who are whining and complaining about underrepresentation and other things, and delight in hating on men and calling guys sexist and misogynist for basically anything that's said that's remotely bad related to them, right? And I'll give you an example. This is a comment that a woman called me out on Facebook because I commented on it with this message, and she said, and I was commenting on this article about Emma Watson, who is the poster child for basically the modern day feminism and this underrepresentation kind of issue. And I said that I think that women, at least in the U.S., are pretty much almost equal to men, and they have pretty much all the same rights that men do in the U.S., including being able to serve in the military. So then this woman called me out, and she said this comment, quite equal. Really, how many members of the US government are female as opposed to male? How many times has there been actual legislation proposed by women to regulate what men do with their bodies? How many women CEOs are out there floating around in the world today as opposed to men? Are you really trying to suggest that the glass ceiling doesn't exist, equal pay, equal work? And spoken like a true chauvinist, things are quite equal simply because I get to vote and can drive a car just like men folk do. Well, this is kind of what I'm talking about, that this isn't really women's rights. Like so-called feminists these days, quote unquote, like to complain that they're underrepresented or over-sexualized or treated in a different way, from everything from movies to video games. But it doesn't have anything to do with women's rights. Like, this is a representation difference, right? So these women, these feminists like themselves, think themselves as exactly equal to men. They want to serve in the military, like they want to like kill people, like whatever, do those things. Fine. Like I'm sure that some GI out there would like switch his role in Iraq or, you know, even in like Syria these days. Now, if a woman likes to take his place, then fine. If you want to like go kill people, then you go do it, you know. But you know, men have traditionally done that stuff because it was a tough job, you know. And if women want to be like tough, that's fine. But in traditionally, men, more men wanted to do those tough jobs than women did. And okay, and then being exactly the same as men, women being exactly the same as men will kind of ruin the fabric of what makes men and women different. I think historically men and women have played different roles in society, and now that the gap is closing, I think that men and women being exactly the same is kind of, I don't know, I think it's kind of nonsense. So what makes men and women attractive to each other is the fact that they're biologically and behaviorally different. If they were the same, there would be less and less attraction between each gender, right? So I live in South Korea right now. Women are actually treated differently than men are. They're told to put on makeup all the time because it's manners. They have the highest gender wage gap inequality in the OECD countries, and they often have to be housewives or the last generation to cook and clean and look pretty for the men all the time. And they have to get plastic surgery to get a better chance of finding a job. So this, I think Korea is a country where actual feminism is needed, right? There's not many feminism in Korea. It's kind of a patriarchal society, but compared to the US, this is a country where more women's rights are needed because there's actually a big noticeable gap between the men and the women. But in the USA, women are more or less pretty equal to men. There's been a lot of progress since the 1960s when the second wave feminism, you know, started. I think in a lot of different ways. In fact, I implore you to name a profession or position where women are not allowed to do in the US. I think women in the US are allowed to do pretty much anything that a guy can do. So I think they have pretty good women's rights. Then that's not like perfect. It's not, I think, was it the Scandinavian countries and Iceland or whatever, those are the absolute best countries for women's rights. So it's not like perfect, but it's like 90 something percent there. So, but the thing is, 90% of the complaining that's done on the internet is by American women, which is really ironic considering they're, you know, in the upper percentile of countries that have almost equal gender, almost a perfect gender equality. You know, there's like 90 something percent there already. Women in the USA, they're pretty much empowered enough to do everything they want already, from serving the military, which is not possible in Korea, playing football and hockey, which again is not possible in other countries, becoming the front runner to be president of the United States, which is Hillary Clinton I'm talking about. It's an equal opportunity country. Anyone can be anything they want. And the supposed lack of representation, or the thing that a lot of feminists like to talk about on social media these days, is because men are traditionally trained to do those fields, like be a director or be a part of the tech industry or be a politician. Men are traditionally trained to do those fields, right? Like being an engineer or being a soldier. If more women would train in those fields, then if they have enough experience, then of course they can do those things, right? And people are saying, oh, Jennifer Lawrence, doesn't make enough money as a Robert Downey Jr. But the thing is, Robert Downey Jr. had a lot more experience than Jennifer Lawrence did. You know, she only started her career 10, 15 some odd years ago. Robert Downey Jr. has had decades of experience. So if women has as much experience, then they could, you know, be paid just as much as the men do. Well, they should be paid just as much as men do, right? If they can do those things. So I think it's just a matter of training. Women need to be trained more in the fields that men traditionally were able to do. And I'm sure if they are, then they can make just as much as men do, because that's how the US works. It works on merit. And then the thing about women being overly sexualized, well, the thing is, guys are kind of like sexualized too. Like, guys have to be buff and muscular and stuff, and whenever there is an article about guys being buff and muscular, no women are complaining about that. But when women are so overly sexualized, then you have all the feminists complaining about it. So it's kind of a double standard for men and women. It's kind of like cherry picking, like the positions where men were traditionally dominant. How about I pick a position like nurse or customer service or a cashier, where traditionally women were preferred over men. So there are a lot of positions that are predominantly women. There are a lot of positions that are predominantly men, and they both serve different roles, I think, because sometimes, our genders are different, and we're just suited to things. One gender is better suited to one thing than another. That's what I'm gonna say. And the wage gap is, yeah, mostly because of experience, I think. And women didn't really, yeah, historically, women didn't get educated as much as men. So, of course, women were discriminated a lot before, but these days, I think women have more education than men do. Okay, so my point is that modern day feminists who complain about these issues aren't really feminists because, again, underrepresentation in the field is not really much to do with the women's rights. If women weren't allowed to work in those fields, then that is a women's rights issue, but I don't think that's the case. I think women can do whatever they want in the US. It's just a matter of breaking tradition, getting more women trained. So I don't think it's anything to do with women's rights. And yeah, like how that girl called me out as a chauvinist. Just assumes that every guy who doesn't agree with them must hate women, indeed. Alright, so what's really ironic about these feminists that hate women, these feminists that hate men, these men hating feminists, is that men were originally the reason why women got these rights in the first place. The whole reason why women got so progressive and their rights increased dramatically in the latter half of the 20th century was because men helped them. And I'm not taking anything away from the suffragists and the women pioneers. I'm not taking anything away from them, but men were in charge of a lot of things back in the day, and men were in a position of power back in the day, right? This must have been the case. For most of history, men have been in charge. So in order for a woman to petition for and receive rights, like the voting rights, abortion rights, birth control, all those things, a woman must have at some point convinced some men in a position of power to give them those rights, right? Because men were in charge back in the day, women didn't have much power, so some men must have helped those women get those rights, right? That's just how it is, right? Like if it was part of Congress was full of men back in the day, and still is to some degree, but that's a different issue. But yeah, now like back in the day, there was full of men, and those men helped those women get those rights passed. So at some point in history, men must have sympathized with those women pioneers and helped them get those rights. And if all those rights were achieved with the help of men, then it's ironic that men are now being hated on and called misogynists so readily on social media these days, even though men were originally the ones that helped the women get those rights, right? And yeah, I would like to add an additional comment by another feminist on social media responding to me. It says, the reason why women are stuck with uncomfortable, inconvenient, and dysfunctional wardrobe, makeup, and hair elements is because in our patriarchal society, women's value is a lot closer tied to her looks rather than her intelligence. Girls and women spend millions of hours more in their lifetime on maintaining their appearance instead of developing their careers, inventing things, or earning money. Trust me, if I was found acceptable by society, every woman would love to wake up with short hair, skip makeup and heels, put comfortable flat shoes and non-tight pants with functional pockets, and still be considered attractive or professional. And I think this is really revealing of the personality of American feminists, because they think they can speak for every woman in the world, and they think their opinion is always the best and the right one. Yeah, first of all, Western countries are not really patriarchal. If you want to look at a patriarchal country, just come to South Korea or go to the Middle East. Those are actual patriarchal countries. Or India, Like, I would love to see evidence that America is still patriarchal. In what way? And secondly, perhaps girls and women like to care about their appearance. They wear skirts and heels because it makes them feel more like a woman. Like, a lot of girls, they don't have to wear skirts and heels. Nobody's forcing them to wear a skirt and heels, unless you're in a certain industry, I think finance or whatever, that you have to dress up all the time. But then guys have to wear suits too, so it's kind of the same, But like a lot of girls, most girls, they're not forced to wear skirts and heels. They choose to wear that. And this is the 1950s, They can wear whatever they want. They won't be ostracized for it. I feel like there is a cultural difference in Korea because every girl is wearing skirts and heels and makeup here, whether they really want to or not, but they're not really complaining about it. So that's really ironic to me. I feel like this idea that every girl wants to dress like a guy or become comfortable like men, do things that men can do, is being like shoved down our throats on like social media and stuff. All these like articles and stuff are being shoved in our faces about the feminists like complaining about the stuff, when really it's only a small and vocal part of the female population that wants that. And most women that I know, they want to feel like a woman, they want to dress like a woman, behave like a woman because, you know, they're a woman. So they're not being forced to, they're not being oppressed. That's just the opinion of a small group of women, small group of women who like to say they're feminists, but not really feminists. They like to just complain about pretty much anything. So yeah, anyways, I hope I made my point. American feminists complaining about these issues, they really need to take a step back and just do some research on whether their complaining is justified, at least in comparison to some other countries, like Korea, for example, because I think the US is actually pretty high on the list for gender equality. And there's not really, like, women have a lot of opportunity to do stuff in the US a lot better than most countries in the world. They really need to take a step back to see whether or not their complaining is justified on these like small little details or issues. So yeah, that's my that